Why do you care so much about what they think? Why does your heart race when you say no? Why do you feel guilty for setting boundaries, as if you've committed a crime? Right now you might believe that being liked, being agreeable, being the one who never causes conflict is the key to happiness. But what if that's the very thing keeping you trapped? Pleasing others isn't kindness. It's self-destruction disguised as virtue. And the worst part, most people don't even realize they're doing it. They think they're just being nice, just being helpful, just being a good person. But deep down, there's something else at play: fear. Fear of rejection. Fear of conflict. Fear that if you stop being useful to others, they will abandon you. But here's the question: if someone's respect for you is based entirely on what you can do for them, is that even respect? Or is it just unspoken manipulation? And more importantly, have you ever stopped to consider why this fear controls you in the first place? From the moment we are born, we are conditioned to associate approval with survival. As children, our safety depended on the acceptance of those around us: parents, teachers, friends. If we disappointed them, we felt threatened. If we upset them, we risked rejection. And that primitive fear of being cast out, it never really goes away. It just disguises itself in adulthood as social anxiety, guilt, and an obsessive need to be seen as good. But here's where things get dangerous. This conditioning creates a loop. The more you please, the weaker you become. The weaker you become, the more you need to please. And before you know it, your entire sense of self is built on a foundation of other people's expectations. Every time you say yes, just to keep the peace, you are trading a piece of your time, energy, and dignity for temporary approval. And that approval?
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
It's as fleeting as smoke. People's expectations are infinite, but your energy is not. You will never satisfy everyone. You can give and give and give and give, and it will never be enough, because the moment you meet one demand, another will take its place. Think about it. How many times have you bent over backward for someone, only to find that they took it for granted? Did they pause to appreciate your sacrifice, or did they just assume you'd do it again? The harsh reality is, when you make yourself endlessly available, people don't value you more. They value you less. They start expecting your compliance rather than appreciating it. So here's the shift that changes everything. Rejection is not proof that you are unworthy. It's proof that you are real. Every time you avoid conflict, you are not preventing rejection. You are just delaying it. Because eventually, no matter how much you try to please, someone will be disappointed. Someone will disagree. Someone will leave. And when that happens, you have two choices. You can either break yourself trying to mold into whatever version of yourself they want, or you can stand firm and realize that the people who truly matter don't love you because you fit their script. They love you because you are solid, because you have a spine, because you know who you are. Think about the people you respect the most. Are they the ones who never ruffle feathers? Or are they the ones who stand their ground, who set boundaries, who aren't afraid to say no when it matters? And here's where things get even more interesting. Silence is more powerful than explanation. People pleasers have an overwhelming urge to justify themselves. I'm so sorry, I just can't because I really wish I could, but I feel bad, but I have to stop. Just stop. When you explain yourself too much, you are subconsciously apologizing for having limits. And the moment you do that, you give people permission to debate your boundaries. But here's the truth: is simple. No, I can't is unarguable. It is final. It is strong. And most importantly, it forces people to respect your decision without opening the door for negotiation. The moment you stop trying to be liked by everyone, you make space for the right people to find you. The ones who respect you. The ones who value you. The ones who don't need you to be a doormat to keep them in your life. Because here's the reality: think about the world's greatest leaders, innovators, revolutionaries. Were they universally liked? No. Were they agreeable, always seeking approval, always bending to fit in? No. They were polarizing. They were disliked by many, but deeply respected by the right people. That is the key. Pleasing others at the cost of yourself is not kindness, it's self-betrayal. And the moment you understand that, everything changes. Because when you stop fearing rejection, when you stop needing permission to exist on your own terms, when you stop explaining and start deciding, you become something most people never become: free. The moment you stop living for others and start living for yourself, something strange happens. At first, people resist. They push back, they test you, they try to guilt trip you into being who you used to be. They say things like, "You've changed," as if that's an insult. But think about that. Why is growth seen as betrayal? Why do people get uncomfortable when you stop being easy to control? The answer is simple: they benefited from your self-sacrifice. They got used to you bending, adjusting, making yourself smaller so they could feel bigger. And now that you've stopped, they feel exposed, because your boundaries force them to confront something they don't want to face: the fact that they were never entitled to your time, your energy, or your constant compliance in the first place. And this is where most people break. This is where they cave in, where they go back to their old ways, because the pressure of disappointing others feels unbearable. But here's the truth: discomfort is not a reason to go back to self-betrayal. Growth is supposed to feel uncomfortable. Power is supposed to come with resistance. And the people who truly respect you, they won't fight your boundaries. They will adjust. Because real relationships, whether friendships, family, or love, are not built on control. They are built on mutual respect. And this is where we separate those who truly break free from those who only pretend to. Because stopping people pleasing isn't just about saying no more often. It's about fundamentally changing the way you see yourself. It's about shifting from a mindset of scarcity to a mindset of abundance, from believing that your worth is tied to how much you give to realizing that your worth has never been dependent on anyone's approval. Most people live their entire lives on defense. They react, they adjust, they shape-shift to fit into whatever version of themselves the world demands. But what happens when you stop playing defense and start playing offense? What happens when you stop waiting for permission and start deciding what you will and won't tolerate? That's when everything changes. Because now, instead of running around trying to keep everyone happy, you become the one who sets the tone. You become the one who decides who gets access to you and who doesn't. And suddenly people start treating you differently, not because they've changed, but because you have. And when you walk into a room, when you speak, when you hold your ground without flinching, people can feel it. That unshakable energy, that quiet confidence, that presence, it's not something you can fake. It's something you earn by refusing to betray yourself, no matter how much pressure the world puts on you to do so. But here's the final test, the one that determines whether you've truly broken free or whether you're still secretly seeking approval. Because the real challenge isn't setting boundaries, it's keeping them. Anyone can say no once. Anyone can decide to stop people-pleasing for a day, a week, maybe even a month. But what happens when the loneliness sets in? What happens when the guilt starts creeping back? When the old patterns try to pull you in? When people start saying, "You're being selfish. You're making things difficult you used to be so much easier to deal with"? That's when most people fold. Because deep down, they're still seeking validation. They still want to be liked. But here's the harsh reality: if your peace depends on everyone else approving of you, you will never be free. Because the world will always have opinions. People will always have expectations. And if you live your life trying to meet them all, you will spend your entire existence chasing a finish line that keeps moving. So the real question is this: do you have the strength to stand alone? Can you hold your boundaries even when it feels like you're losing people? Can you sit in the discomfort of not being liked and still know without a doubt that you are making the right choice? Because the moment you can, the moment you stop needing external validation to feel whole, that is the moment you become untouchable. And that is the moment you take your power back for good. Most people think freedom comes from doing whatever they want, but real freedom, the kind that actually changes your life, comes from no longer being controlled by the invisible chains of guilt, approval, and expectation. The strongest people aren't the ones who never feel pressure. They're the ones who refuse to let that pressure dictate their actions. But here's the part no one talks about: when you finally stop pleasing others, when you stop molding yourself to fit into places you don't belong, a strange thing happens. At first, it feels like loss. You lose connections that were built on your willingness to bend. You lose the illusion of harmony that came from always saying yes. You lose the temporary comfort that came from avoiding conflict. And in that space, doubt creeps in. Maybe I was too harsh, maybe I should have compromised, maybe I should go back to the way things were. But here's the truth: what you are losing is not real. It's a facade. It's a version of peace that only existed because you were sacrificing yourself to maintain it. And that kind of peace, it was never sustainable. It was never built to last. It was built on your silence, your exhaustion, your willingness to disappear whenever someone else's needs took priority over yours. So the real question is not what am I losing? The real question is what am I finally making space for? Because the moment you stop living for approval, you make space for something far more powerful: respect. The respect you have for yourself, the respect others start giving you when they realize you are no longer so easily swayed, the respect that comes from knowing that for the first time in your life, you are not negotiating your worth. And that kind of respect, it's rare. Because most people never reach it. They stay trapped in a cycle of seeking validation, of needing reassurance, of making themselves small just to avoid rocking the boat. But the people who break free, they move differently. They speak differently. They walk into a room and you can feel the difference in their energy, not because they are aggressive, not because they are loud, but because they are solid. They don't need to prove anything. They don't need to explain themselves. They don't need to constantly justify why they deserve to take up space. And that kind of presence, it changes everything. Suddenly, the same people who used to take advantage of you start keeping their distance, not because they dislike you, but because they can no longer manipulate you. The ones who only liked you because you were easy to control fade away, and the people who truly respect you step forward. And at first, it feels strange. It feels unfamiliar. Because for the first time, your relationships are being built on something real: mutual respect, not silent submission. But here's where most people fail. They reach this point, they taste this freedom, and then they sabotage themselves. Not because they want to, but because deep in their subconscious, they are still wired to believe that love, friendship, and acceptance must be earned through sacrifice. So they start slipping. They let one small boundary slide, then another, and before they know it, they are back where they started, over-giving, over-explaining, over-apologizing, trapped in the same cycle they fought so hard to escape. And the reason is simple: if you do not fully believe that you deserve to stand your ground, you will always find a way to shrink yourself back into a version of you that is easier for others to digest. So the real battle is not just about saying no more often. It's about reprogramming the way you see yourself. It's about understanding, at the deepest level, that you are not here to be convenient. You are not here to be easy to control. You are not here to mold yourself into whatever version of you makes other people comfortable. You are here to be whole. And the moment you accept that, the moment you stop needing to be liked and start choosing to be respected, that's when you become unstoppable. Most people never reach this level because the moment they start standing their ground, they mistake discomfort for danger. They feel the tension when they say no. They see the disappointment in someone's eyes. They sense the shift in energy when they refuse to comply, and instead of holding firm, they panic. They assume they've done something wrong, that they're being cold, that they're pushing people away. But here's what they don't realize: discomfort is not a sign that you're making a mistake. It's a sign that you're breaking a pattern. And patterns don't break quietly. They resist, they fight back, they pull at your emotions, trying to drag you back into familiar territory. And if you don't see it for what it is, you'll go right back to your old ways, thinking you're fixing something when really you're just betraying yourself all over again. The truth is, you cannot grow and stay comfortable at the same time. You cannot step into your power without disrupting the dynamics that kept you weak. And you cannot expect people who benefited from your silence to celebrate the moment you find your voice. Growth always comes with resistance, and the sooner you accept that, the easier it becomes to stop mistaking guilt for a reason to shrink back into who you used to be. And this is where things get real, because it's not just about handling the reactions of others. It's about handling the war that happens inside you. Because even when you start setting boundaries, even when you start demanding respect, there will still be a voice in your head that whispers, what if they leave? What if I don't care? What if I'm being too much? That voice is not wisdom. That voice is conditioning. It's the echo of every moment in your past where you learned that love had to be earned, that approval had to be maintained, that your worth was tied to how much you could give. And if you don't recognize it for what it is, you will mistake it for truth. But here's the reality: if someone's connection to you is so fragile that it cannot withstand your boundaries, then that connection was never real. Real relationships, whether friendships, family, or love, do not disintegrate the moment you stop overextending yourself. If anything, they get stronger. Because when you stand firm, when you stop people-pleasing, when you finally demand the respect you deserve, You filter out the ones who were only there for what they could take. And what you're left with, that is real. That is solid. That is worth keeping. But here's the hardest part, the final test, the one that determines whether you truly stay free or slip back into the same cycle. Because it's not enough to set boundaries once. It's not enough to realize your worth in a single moment. The real challenge is maintaining it, especially when life pressures you to fall back into old habits. There will be moments when it feels easier to just give in, to say yes when you mean no, to tolerate things you shouldn't, to avoid the discomfort of standing your ground. And in those moments, you will have a choice to betray yourself for the comfort of others or to stay firm no matter how uncomfortable it gets. Most people break. They go back, they shrink, they slip into the same patterns, telling themselves it's just this once. But the ones who don't, the ones who hold their ground even when it's hard, even when they're doubted, even when they feel the urge to fall back into old ways, they become untouchable. They become the kind of people who walk into a room and command respect without saying a word. They become the ones who no longer need validation, who no longer fear rejection, who no longer live their lives trying to keep the peace at the cost of their own soul. And that kind of person is rare. But if you can hold the line, if you can stand firm, if you can refuse to let guilt pull you back into who you used to be, then you don't just stop people pleasing, you become someone who is truly, completely, and unshakably free.